Yes, happy New Year, and we'll go ahead and get the January 14th, 2025 Transportation Authority of Calhoun County Annual Meeting started. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And Madam Secretary, if we can do roll call, please. Here. Present. Here.
Staff, we have Mallory, Matthew, Peter.
No, Peter and Clark are on Zoom.
Chrissy here. And we have Chuck Asher.
And I'll just clarify that staff means technical assistance from Battle Creek City Transit, and Chuck Asher means LAC chairperson. We got it? Okay, great. If we can, I would seek a motion for approval of the agenda that's been distributed. And
so moved, Watson.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Watson. Is there a second support?
Turkwood seconds.
Okay, great. Any changes to the agenda that's been printed or what have you? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. I will seek a motion on the next item, approval of the minutes for December 10th, 2024.
So moved, Watson.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Watson
Davis.
and supported by Secretary Davis. Any discussion on those minutes as printed? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. This time, are there any public comments or agenda items? Did we want to?
The board comments.
Thank you. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything that we have for the consent agenda that we need to take care of today? Great, hearing none, we'll move on to presentations and recognition. Boy, we're moving right through this at a very brisk pace. There are no presentations and recognitions. So that brings us right on into Acting Treasurer Amy Evans and review of finance and budget report. Amy, you want to give us an update?
Sure, thank you. So far, we have received 2 tax payments from Springfield and 2 from Marshall. 1 was mailed from Battle Creek that I have yet to receive. And I have checked in with Albion and I'm waiting to hear about the status of payments there. I've completed all the ACH forms for all of the communities as well as updated W-9s with our new address. And have paid Bluefish's last invoice. And once I receive the canceled check, we'll provide that to the city to close out that contract. You also have a balance sheet showing what the tax account balance was at the end of the year. Which does not include, it includes 1 payment each from Springfield and Marshall, and 1 from each have since been received. Which will be on the next meeting's report.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay.
If there's anything else, any questions anybody has?
Any questions for the treasurer? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to public hearings and subsequent board action. Are there any pieces there? No, seeing none there. We'll jump right into unfinished business. I'll invite Chuck up. Chuck, are there any LAC updates?
Not at this time. We're waiting for developments and something to do, actually.
Great. Well, we're headed that direction. So thank you very much, Chuck. Amy, you want to head up the insurance policy piece? I know that there were some, we were on the cusp of choosing a D&O insurance provider and other insurance options, and I know that we had gotten quotes in and what have you. Several favorable quotes were there. No, it's okay. And I think that we had worked on settling on one piece to get that active. And given the circumstances, they were able to confirm that the insurance pricing, although extended past the 30-day threshold or whatever the threshold was, did not change.
Okay.
So, we're still in the same hunt in terms of meeting that threshold of
Price.
price, content, and comparability.
Yeah, so, that quote from Wurgis for the nonprofit organization D&O insurance is 908. They did include 3 other items for consideration. Crime coverage for $270, cyber risk liability for $961, and terrorism coverage for $25. And those are all for the annual, for the year, which if we were to take all of them, the total annual premium would be $2,164. If we just go with the nonprofit organization D&O coverage, that's 908. And they have various coverage periods and payment periods or plans. And this one, they're proposing for a 3-year. Because if you do it for 3 years, you get that price for 3 years. If you do it for 1 year, then you get the price for a year. So, and then if you pay all at once, you get a better deal than if you pay over time, just like any other insurance company.
Sure thing.
So, I guess it's a matter of deciding if we want just the nonprofit D&O insurance, which is what we were seeking quotes for. And then if we do want it, do we want it for 1 year, 3 years, or?
Yeah, based on that feedback, is there any discussion around those things?
We need the other 3 at this time.
I don't know that I would be the best person to answer that question. Based on reading the information shared, I wondered that too. I'll just put it that way.
So I would say that no. They
I
are.
would hate to be the person to say no and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
something
Oh,
happens.
well,
That's
well, yeah, I mean, that's how insurance works.
right.
But this is about getting D&O insurance in the books. So I think that we need to take care of that task. A good insurance provider says, based on who your organization is and what have you thought about these things? Our organization right now, we're building an organization. So currently we have limited assets. We don't have any physical property and things of that nature. I think that we keep those on the radar. I think there's a good argument for the cyber terrorism type piece. And I think we need to revisit that with our SAM.gov responsibilities and what have you, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, the crime one is like literally there has to be a crime that takes place. It's not something that seemed there. It's very specific as far as what that covers. And then the cyber risk liability, that's computer related. And then terrorism is an act of terrorism that has been actually the government has said that that's what it, I mean, it's pretty specific language that they have in here.
Perpetrated.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like I said, I think that what's in front of us is the D&O piece.
Okay.
Those other pieces, although they're very important, I think that to answer those questions, we would invite the provider here to answer those questions, and then we may move into that.
Yeah, because we're going to need a lot of other coverage in the future on our vehicles and liability and
100%.
employees.
100%. We're reviewing another contract right now with our address mailbox provider that required boilerplate information around, liability and things of that nature. So that there's question there. And so that all falls underneath that. And I would ask whoever we chose as our provider to come in and help us sort through that based on that industry standard. Make sense?
So would you like a motion to approve the, I believe it was,
Yeah.
One or three. So based upon that, I'm assuming it sounds as if we should do a 1 year,
It sounds like we should go
a 1 year policy
1 year. Oh.
versus a 3 year.
Well, what we're talking about is the DNO. So assuming that we're gonna be active for 3 years, I would push back and say that the 3 years for that. And then those other add-ons could be added on to those policies later, as we got our questions answered. Does that make sense?
So when we say that those other policies can be added on, are we talking after the 3 years or can you like amend the policy?
You would amend your policy. So our main policy would be the DNO plus these other things.
Thank you.
And before we enter that contract, I would probably reaffirm that, but the way that I understand it is these are add-on pieces as we saw those going forward.
And the other thing we would need to authorize or have action on would be lump sum or stagger payments. I
100%.
advocate for lump sum and be done with it.
So that would be part of the motion or what have you. Any other discussion about the insurance piece in front of us? Tom, did you want to make?
I'll make the motion that we get the insurance policy from Wargis in a lump sum for a 3-year period for $908 per year,
On the DNO.
the DNO.
Yeah. Is there a second to that?
Second, Watson.
It's been, any other discussion other than the discussion that's been had thus far? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Perfect. We'll go ahead and, answer some of those other questions, Amy, and, get that moving and ratified. All right. Under, unfinished business C, TAC Planning Committee. I would ask, Ms. Avis to come and give us such a report.
So there has been a subcommittee of the TAC board that has been meeting and will continue to meet with the city of Battle Creek and the city of Marshall.
Who's all in that committee?
That is Janasia, Eric, and Tom. And then, of course, city representatives include city attorney, city HR, finance, myself. And then in future meetings, the TAC would be accompanied by the consultants, legal counsel, accounting counsel. The purpose of those meetings are to establish a letter of intent and a memorandum of understanding in the very near future, hopefully, that outlines the path forward for the transition at each of the cities. So we talk about, for example, fiscal years and operational responsibilities, transfer of assets and real property. And then, of course, working with FTA and MDOT on those same things. So working hand in hand with our partners at each of the cities and with the TAC board, that planning committee is working through all of those pieces that include administration, assets, and liabilities. If you guys have any questions about the meetings, those will be regular meetings moving forward with the goal implementation date still being, like we talked about before, October 1 of 2025, that the TAC becomes that designated recipient. And so, of course, we would want to have letters of intent or agreements in place prior to that, that outline each party's responsibilities and liabilities.
Any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Assets in Battle Creek are different than assets in Albion. So are you going to generate letters of understanding for those cities that, communities that don't have anything or present assets that you're going to work with?
So at this time, the planning committee is really working through the assets that exist and have state and federal interests. So the city of Battle Creek owns and operates vehicles and has property that will eventually become the responsibility of the TAC. So the purpose of those meetings is to identify that transition of responsibility, because the city of Albion doesn't currently operate service and doesn't have any federally or state-funded assets. There wouldn't be a letter of intent at this time. Now, separately, when we talk about planning services, the city of Albion would be included in those conversations on the division of services. But when we're talking about the transfer of assets, the city of Albion wouldn't be included. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? For Ms. Davis, departments?
Okay. Yeah.
Did this next meeting get scheduled? I have not seen anything.
It did not. I'm working on that and also scheduling with the city of Marshall.
I forewarned William that
Yes.
he had talked to you.
Yeah, we met briefly last week and discussed who they would like at those meetings.
Perfect. Thank you. Moving on to new business. Election of officers. Vice Chair Douglas, did you want?
Well, I guess, first of all, I've enjoyed what I've been doing. I would, again, if the current slate would like to stay in their positions, I'll be glad to, I'd like to see that happen if we could. So I guess I look across to the three of you.
So your proposal is that, if I can formalize that a little bit.
Making a motion about myself, so. But if this.
We're talking about, you know.
There we go.
I'll make the motion that we retain the current slate of officers for the TAC.
Okay, it's been
Thank you.
moved. Is there any support for that?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. For matters of discussion, I will ask each of the members, are you interested in retaining your positions based on motion presented? Yeah.
Yes, I am, as long as I don't have to take minutes.
I didn't ask for caveats. It's not a negotiation. It's not negotiating.
That's the next agenda item.
Yeah, negotiating your position. Thank you, Secretary Dave. Amy, are you willing to continue as
Mine's-
acting and then
yes.
moving into back to a regular member representing
Yes.
your area? Okay. Commissioner Morris?
I'm fine with how I am.
Right. Dr. Watson?
Yes, I'm okay.
And
I'm good.
Assumed by your enthusiasm, you're good. It's threatening me, so I say that in jest. Can you retain being chair? So, having those acknowledgements, I'll go ahead and call all those in favor. Of,
I don't know if you do have a motion. Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All those in favor of the slate as presented and us moving forward with those terms for our bylaws, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thank you, Tom, for your help with that.
Okay. And if I can maybe help on the next one, our bylaws allow us to have a recording secretary, but it needs to be appointed by the board. Matt has been doing that, and I guess I'm looking out there as, I think we should officially appoint him if he's going to continue that capacity.
Can we ask Matt if he's willing to? We're talking like he's not getting here. So I'll go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Matt, are you at all interested in continuing those duties as you have been? I'm not sure if we had, somebody came off of mute. Not sure if it was you, Peter or Clark.
This is Peter, yes.
Yeah, we have a little background interference. Peter, did you want add something to what we were just discussing?
No, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Then I'll make a motion to appoint Matt as our recording secretary for the next year.
Seconded, Watson.
Okay, so we move to second. Any other discussion? Matt, you clear about what we asked you to do? Vivian will try and add some more things to you. So beware. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Perfect. Thank you. Discussion on purchasing and procurement policies. I know that Peter and Clark, you did some extensive work as our support consultants on this policy thing. Do you want to kind of give us some highlights? And I'd also ask Ms. Evans and Ms. Davis to chime in if necessary too. Where we at? I know we had our first draft is where we are in our possession. Did you want to add some context to that, Peter? Barbara?
Yes, I have reviewed various policies and they actually match the one that I had when I was CEO of the Rapid in many ways. You have my memorandum that explains the highlights of what is in the document. The document that I provided in full is the manual, the policy and procedure manual for Akron Metro in Akron, Ohio, which was the best policy that I found for your purposes and is fully compliant with federal procedures. What I would ask you today is to take that memorandum I sent you and accept it formally so that we can begin the next step, which is to build a memorandum that designs the system that you need to put into place. Clark is fully aware of this and he can continue this in case I lose you somehow in this Zoom meeting. But what you have in front of you is the manual, the full manual, but also my memorandum that highlights various things that I think are of specific interest to this board. Primarily, I think the major one is that all purchases of $100,000 or more must be approved by this board. And there's other highlights in my memorandum that require board attention, and I think that you should look at that. You should have a discussion among yourselves about what I've provided, but at your next meeting, we will be there, Clark and I will be there in full to ensure that you accept a formal policy of how you're going to proceed.
Thank you, sir. I know that we had some minor changes that we had noted upon review. There's been some communication traffic about that that we'll give back to Peter and what have you. I'm looking for direction in terms of this could go two different ways in my opinion. We have a policy in full, although it needs some minor changes in terms of names and so on and so forth, which we've identified. But do we go ahead and ratify policy to put in place right now if we're comfortable with those thresholds of 100,000 and so on and so forth, saying that we could enter into purchasing agreements based on how it reads right now? Or do we formalize a subcommittee to kind of make those tweaks, because they are tweaks, it's not a throwing the whole thing out, make those tweaks and then come back and we ratify that at that time, knowing that we'd probably call a special meeting to speed that up. What's your pleasure? Does that make sense? Sorry. Chair recognizes Ms. Davis from the floor.
My recommendation would be similar to what Peter said. Adopt his administrative memo that outlines kind of the changes he would make, identifies the thresholds. And then if you wanted to identify a subcommittee to provide feedback to him on the memo or the policy, I would maybe caution you not to adopt a policy that isn't in its final state yet. if you adopted the policy at the next meeting, so you had the back and forth enough to have a draft that you could adopt at the next meeting, you'd be able to sign that at the next meeting and then immediately begin purchasing processes. I think the important thing to look at in his memo would be those purchasing thresholds primarily. So at what points, for example, does the board require approval? At what points do items go to bid versus be able to be quotes? From a technical expertise point, I would say that this policy is sufficient, would give the system flexibility to be able to move quickly on purchases when needed, but still give the board control over major purchases. That's my thought.
So can I ask a question
Yep.
about the purchasing thresholds?
Yes.
It says micro purchases are goods valued at 10,000 or less for federally funded procurements. So I guess all my questions are these amounts FTA's required amounts, or are these amounts the ones that Akron used, FTA agreed with, and they're, common practice?
It's a combination of both. And so it looks like they've set some of their thresholds under what the federal standards are, but probably out of best practice, right? So for example, you might not want the executive director to have control up to 250,000. You would want to have control as a board up to 100,000. Still giving the executive director flexibility to make purchases and the department to make purchases, but still having control over that $100,000 threshold. So some of the thresholds in the policy follow FTA procurement guidelines, and then some of them follow just best practice.
And how do we know which are which?
So the micro purchase, that's a federal threshold. Small purchase is an Akron threshold. It looks like they're Buy America. It follows the federal standard. So that's for rolling stock. And the Buy America refers to the composition and assembly being in the United States for all federally funded rolling stock. So a certain percentage of your rolling stock must meet Buy America.
What about petty cash?
FTA is silent on that, and that would be a best practice.
Okay, and then the purchases over 100,000 coming to the board?
That is a best practice.
Okay.
Hold on just a second. Hey, Peter, if we could have you mute, there's a little background interference.
Sure, I'll take care of that.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think FTA, although they set the thresholds, most importantly is the process that each purchase is completed. That is what they set. So, and this policy follows that. So for example, the number of solicitations, when a solicitation is completed, the additional documentation that goes with it. I would say the only thing missing from the policy that Akron shared would be any addendum or appendix that includes those forms. We typically use the forms that MDOT provides just because we know that those are compliant. But you have to document everything from how did you come up with that price estimate to how did you determine that that was a fair and reasonable price. When you're buying rolling stock, you have to do pre-award audits, post-delivery audits of that Buy America composition. So my only feedback would maybe be to include some of those forms or templates for that documentation. FTA does not provide any sort of template. They need to see that documentation. So again, our procurement policy that's FTA approved includes the MDOT forms as those. And we could do the same thing here.
Great. Any other, just for clarification purposes for recording, what is FTA?
Federal Transit Administration.
Yeah, thank you.
2 questions?
Was that one of them, what FTA was?
No,
Okay, great.
I think we have that in our acronym.
The three-page acronym list.
Yeah, that's in my book here. 2 questions. One is who will be doing, I'm using your words, sanitize this to make it fit TACC? Is that going to be done by you, by Peter, by Clark, or a volunteer? Who who is actually going to do that? Because again, 2 weeks are going to go by pretty quick here.
Yep. I believe Peter and Clark will provide the draft. If there's some tweaks we need to make, again, they can provide it in a Word document, or I can convert the PDF into a Word document for them. They can provide that. If there's any tweaks the TAC wants to make as a subcommittee, we could make those. But otherwise, Peter and Clark will provide it.
This wasn't one of my questions, but the subcommittee would probably have to meet early next week.
I would imagine so, yes.
Is
I
that-
would say before Thursday.
And is that within Peters and Clark's timeframe to be ready with a sanitized document?
Clark is saying yes.
Okay. All right. I think it was. My other question relates to professional services. What rights do we have as a board to choose professional services? Be it labor counsel, be it legal counsel, accounting services. I mean, do we have to bid those or take competitive bids and go through a process then? Or can we, I can refer to City of Marshall's purchasing policy, professional services are exempt and you can choose the service you want because cheaper isn't better. And so I guess I'm asking that question of, first of all, do we have to go through a bid process?
Most likely, yes. Very few things under FTA are exempt from a competitive process. You also can't, you're splitting, so you also can't split a procurement to keep it under a threshold. So, if you were it's picking out professional services, 25,000 of 20,000 to stay under that threshold. I would say that most likely based on the Akron policy, if you are going to, you would most likely reach that threshold for competitive procurement. Now, competitive procurement doesn't mean it has to be the lowest price. There are, if you're just going with quotes, so a small purchase, for example, is based on quotes. In that case, price is the only factor for award. If you're doing something like an RFP, then that's based on reviewing and scoring the actual proposals, similar to what we did with Bluefish when we awarded their contract. So I would say you could task once you adopt or in the interim, task your consultants with drafting a solicitation for those services. And then you would be able to start moving forward as soon as that procurement policy was approved.
Read a part of the contract to you that relates to what you're
Yes.
asking. It says Metro must utilize competitive negotiation procedures for procurement of architectural/engineering and other related professional services, whereby competitors' qualifications are evaluated and the most qualified competitors are selected, subject to negotiation of fair and reasonable compensation.
So based on that, and based on your experience, typically how long does it take? Let's pick on accounting services. In your guesstimation, what would you feel would be a time frame to have a recommendation to this board?
I would say realistically, you could have a contract in front of the board in 30 days, including this time frame for the policy to be approved. So if you were working concurrently on that solicitation, as soon as your policy was approved, you'd be able to move forward with soliciting quotes or proposals for those services. Leave a period of time open for businesses to respond to that solicitation, then meet immediately as soon as that closes to score it, and then at the next meeting, be able to award that contract.
We approved this at our next meeting. Probably the earliest we would have any professional service approval at this board would be at our March meeting.
Correct. I would say maybe February, your February meeting.
That's, I know, pushing
Yep.
that 30 days, but I'm just, so the first meeting, so as long as we know that that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. And in the meantime, you could engage Peter and Clark to see if there's a path forward for services in between. So I'm thinking, for example, tax filing If you don't have an accountant on retainer or under contract at that point, if you were able to just purchase those services directly with a local tax company, things like that, you could work with your consultants through.
So based on that, I would propose that we implement a small subcommittee to work on this feedback with Peter and Clark immediately. I know that we've got a group, and if you're amenable, I would volunteer for that committee along with you, Tom, and Amy. And we would work with technical assistants and the consultants to kind of clean that up. I've seen the most feedback in that respect. So we can jump on that next week.
Yep.
And then my image, Tom, to your point, because this is important, my image is that a possible special meeting or something like that could be called, and we handle this issue so that we can get our pieces in place to get things moving. I think we owe it to the taxpayers to get those pieces moving as soon as possible. So any feedback on that? I see a lot of head nods. Those affirmative.
Sounds great.
Subcommittee, we good? Tom is hesitant, but
I'm
we
hesitant
will-
only as I just need to know when we would schedule. I got some commitments.
I'll work with you. I'll
Yeah,
shoot you
yeah.
an email and get some availability. Will you remind me when you get back? Yeah.
We'll work around your schedule, Tom. I need your skepticism at the table.
Well,
It can be virtual or in person.
yeah, I'm scheduling some things that I can schedule around everything, but I just need to know when it might be.
Oh, Tom, we're gonna do it when you're free. You're not getting out of this.
Make doctors mad, so just.
Yes. So we'll make sure that that's important. We have the right voices, and then the feedback from the other parts of the committee, other part of the board will be important as well. Any other pieces? So we got a subcommittee form. We'll work on a polling of when we're available to meet, and then move that forward with Peter and Clark.
Did I hear that we officially should accept the January 4th memorandum?
That would be Peter's approval or Peter and Clark's approval to move forward with their recommendation and their recommended changes in that memo.
Okay. Peter, Clark, you agree with that direction?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and accept a motion on that memo. Memorandum of understanding provided by Peter and Clark.
Also move that.
Okay, it's been moved.
Support.
It's been moved and so it's been moved by Tarkowitz, supported by Davis. Any other discussion other than what we've already had? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Motion carries. We'll move right into the board conflict of interest forum. You know, that was something that we had on the table, and other than the fact, go ahead, Amy.
Notice that I don't have copies for everyone, but I do have the form. It was in the packet, and so we will need to come sign them next meeting. So everyone has one.
Is that something that we can send out to the board electronically? And then we go ahead and sign those, get those copies in, we can ratify that, then bring those.
Make copies right now.
Well, let's,
Do we have to approve the form? We've approved our policy already. So we just need to sign them. Am I correct?
The policy was approved. The form was not included in the policy or part of the policy. It's a standalone form, and I don't know if it automatically is approved by approving the policy, even though it wasn't an attachment or addendum or anything like that. But
I think for good measure, we should approve the form that we'll use in conjunction with the policy, and go ahead and get those copies made and go from there. So
So I'll move, we accept the form presented in the packet.
it's been moved to accept that form. Is there a second for that?
Second, Davis.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Same sign. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get copies of those, and before we leave today, we'll be in compliance with pieces. All right. All right. Having said that, I'll go ahead and move us along while those copies are being made. Mailbox agreement. Do I need to give some context to that?
Yeah, so.
Why we need that, or why this is coming to the floor, then you can kind of take over? Okay. So we know that, our former treasurer had used, just to get us going, prior to, the millage vote or what have you, that, she used her personal address for a TAC address, business address. With the unfortunate circumstances, we needed to, and the approval of the millage, we need to ratify a business address. And one of the proposals were that we use one of our municipal partners, if you will, to utilize that address. And Battle Creek Unlimited has given us some feedback in terms of providing such service at their address and giving us an official business address and what have you. But it came with a little bit of a contract. So Amy, would you like to kind of give us the highlights of what we received?
Yeah, it's a mailbox license agreement for $25 a month to utilize a license, or excuse me, a mailbox in their building, a building B. And it also offers conference space, excuse me, at $15 an hour, $60 for 4 hours, or $120 for the full day at 8 hours, if we ever needed to use their space for meeting. My it's a pretty forward agreement. However, my hesitation about it, and it's not really to hesitate to do it, it's more a matter of just maybe tweaking the language, but they're saying that it's between them, and it mentions the Transportation Authority of Calhoun County once, but then it refers to us as Ride Calhoun throughout the rest of it. And so I just wonder if perhaps we could have them change that to either TAC or licensee, as they're referring to themselves as licensor.
Yeah, I think we can make those tweaks. Those are small, minor pieces based on our understanding of who we are.
Yes. But other than that, yeah, it's for a year, or actually it's a month to month, but it starts at the beginning of the year, excuse me. Month to month basis until canceled by either party upon 30 days prior written notice to the other party.
Okay, so just to clarify, because the standard question we've gotten prior to this endeavor is, why can't we just go get a PO box? Well, when you're an entity that is under sam.gov, you can't have a PO box. So you need an actual business transacting address. The full disclosure, I'm the board chair of BCU, so I won't be signing this contract or what have you. But having been a business owner that was incubated by BCU, this is a standard contract that businesses used when you have BCU support. So it's kind of like a condo piece. You get assigned an office and so on and so forth. So our address would be almost an office, although we wouldn't have necessarily physical space. We do have a mailbox in that B2 facility and can utilize that address to transact business. If we had to have meetings there or so on and so forth, that does not come without cost, because they have a standard with all of their companies that they're not giving away space. But I think that those fees are that they're charging are kind of the lowest in the area, and what have you. And then you have someone, the way that mailbox thing would work is they would call a representative of the board and say, you have mail here, and we can swing by whenever and kind of pick that up and kind of have a relationship with them, and they would check that and as often as possible. So it's not like it would be unsupervised, if you know what I mean. Yes, ma'am.
Can that be in the contract, that agreement? Because it says in here that this agreement may not be modified orally or in any manner other than by an agreement in writing signed by the parties here too. And it doesn't say anything about them notifying us, which would be really nice.
Yeah, I think if we add that to, as an addendum, if you could please let us know when we have mail and we will, what have you. So they're pretty flexible.
Then who would we have them notifying?
You,
I live right
yeah, you could probably walk there. So, yes.
today, but
Yeah,
on a nice
yeah.
day.
A representative of the board, but you would be notified as probably the acting treasurer and the signer of that document. And we would go from there. So any other discussion items on that piece?
Just a question. Do we have the capability of paying them electronically? Rather than,
Like through bill pay through our online.
what I was
You could
trying
do
to
that.
avoid is writing a $25 check every month. Either we write one check for the entire year, or they do electronic ACH type.
I can ask
I
them.
want to make it as convenient for you and the future treasurer so that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, they have,
Sum of $25 per month payable monthly in advance. So it doesn't go into. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'd like to save writing check every month.
Yep, no, they have bill pay too. So I'm pretty sure they would accept all forms of payment.
Once a year, of course, is convenient for everyone.
If you
If
all wanted us
possible.
to do that, I could.
That's a thing too.
So just pay for the year.
If that's a suggestion, we're about to have a motion. And so some of those tweaks that you have, I know that we're acting treasurer Evans mentioned that we will go back and make some minor modifications. Some of those questions about insurance requirements and things of that nature are boilerplate for a company that is possibly in-house. And so she'll be following up on those pieces, but that's not going to impede the activity, if you know what I mean. Good. So I think part of what we'll add to what we're doing in terms of that piece is possibly paying for a full year of the base part of the agreement, which will be usage of the mailbox and address and what have you.
Okay.
And then the other pieces of that, such as meeting space, office space, conference center, or what have you, will be as needed. Okay? Is there a motion to, one, approve this direction with this agreement, and two, give the acting treasurer the authority to negotiate those things that we've identified?
Also move.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there any support?
Support.
Oh, Commissioner Morris, welcome. Welcome to the meeting. It's been moved and supported. Any other discussion that we haven't had? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Perfect. We'll go ahead and thank you very much for all your activity with that piece. And again, I'm trying to limit my exposure there, given my position with that organization. Move into bylaws revision to change mailing addresses. Tom, you've been the king of bylaws. Did you?
Well, actually, I think Vivian noticed this. I believe there was that man. I believe in our bylaws, it has, and I'll look it up here in a second, is that has our address as Linda's address. Also, I believe at the time we adopted bylaws, we didn't have our web address. So I don't know if we need to revise our bylaws for this address change.
Can you confirm? Because I thought when I just glanced at them, I didn't see an address
Okay,
included.
give me a
But
few seconds.
if you have them there, that would be helpful.
Mistaken there. I would agree that it is not in the bylaws. So I think when I mentioned this, I thought it was, but somewhere in one of our policies, I know we do have, it might be in our FOIA policy, that maybe we can bring that back at the next meeting, but I believe our FOIA policy does have an address and an email address, for, people, for application for FOIAs.
So check it, and if it does, bring it forward to this meeting.
In the second meeting in January. I thought it was in the bylaws, but now I'm thinking it's at least in FOIA. I don't know about any of the other policies. I'll look
Okay.
this month or the next week. So I'll put that in my work agenda. So there shouldn't be any action we need to do at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. We'll put that on, we'll table that and,
Agenda for next.
yep, and revisit that, in subsequent future meeting. Our next piece is, new board member search discussion for the acting treasurer. I know from my seat, I'm still waiting for some feedback. I'll put out officially, since we didn't discuss this last meeting, that throughout our municipalities, if there's any interest in folks being interested in being nominated for treasurer for this body, we would be willing to take a look at those pieces. I know that we had a couple of interested parties. Mine is still pondering, and we know that I like quick action. So yours is duly noted, Tom. Are there any other suggestions, or we want to?
I just want to say,
that?
the
Yes, ma'am.
person that was recommended to me has not been contacted or talked to at all.
Right.
So.
It's merely your
And
suggestion.
the other thing is, it just has to be somebody from the county.
Mhm.
Calhoun County does not have to be in our four cities, similar to Dr. Watson. And Linda, of course, was outside the city.
Yes, county representative. Okay, so if,
The TAC is not looking to fill the treasurer position, you're just looking.
to nominate. Oh, yes, open position, yes.
You mentioned to Doug Farrell, he asked me on Sunday, I said, we're working on it, so he's being patient from the county. It's a new position over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, herein lies the conflict based on what you just said. We have a person that is acting based on the replacement of the other treasurer, and the deal that I cut was that it's not permanent. So I just want everybody to know publicly that that's happening in the background. And there's a strong recommendation that someone with financial acumen is moves you to the top of the list. So I'm just saying. All right. But that's still a process, and those things can be either submitted through the Ride Calhoun website. We'll take a look at that. That's a good communication tool. Or reached out to any one of the board members that represent TACC or the LAC. All right. Okay. Any other comments? Clear? What have you? Okay. Amy is good with anything that puts her in that trajectory to get another person on the board. So we're good. Moving on to discussion of congressional hearing for budget allocations. I hear congressional, I need some technical assistance. So I will ask, Davis.
I'm not specifically, I'm not sure exactly if this was about the congressionally directed spending. So we did, at the last meeting, we allocated that budget for the congressionally directed spending. We are working with FTA to get that grant submitted. Separately from that, we're in fiscal year 25, right? Fiscal year 25 started October 1. If you follow politics at all, you know that, we narrowly avoided a government shutdown, and we have a continuing resolution, but we still don't have apportionments, right? So we still don't have a full federal budget, which means we don't have a full federal register, which means we don't have apportionments for fiscal year 25. This means that we don't know what federal grant amounts we're getting for fiscal year 25, even though, you know, we're well into the fiscal year already. We always base it on the prior year's award, which last year was about 1.9 million is what we received in the city of Battle Creek. And so that's what we're moving forward with. But separate from that, on the House side, I will share that House Bill 6088 passed, is being signed by the governor. That provides changes to Public Act 196. And the biggest changes are to, I think it's Wayne and Oakland County, where townships and villages are not able to opt out of a public transit agency or authority. That doesn't affect us. That will likely never expand to this side. But the part that could potentially affect the TAC in the future is that it lifts the restrictions on the 5-year millage amount. So Peter spoke at our workshop about the good and the bad of that. Would I ever suggest that the TAC go for a 15-year millage? Probably not. But it does give you a little bit more flexibility at renewal time to be able to consider something longer than 5 years, shorter than 5 years, and consider the state of the TAC at that time as you continue to expand. Other than that, we are preparing application for more congressionally directed spending that would provide a facility. So we're asking for, I believe it's 26.4 million federal dollars that would be matched at the state level to provide a new facility and or facilities that would cover operations, maintenance, and administration. Of course, we're doing that application under the city of Battle Creek, just as we've done all of the others, because the TAC is not eligible to receive those federal funds yet if it were awarded. Of course, the whole premise of that application is that in order to grow, we need a larger facility. Those of you who have seen our facility understand the constraints that we're in. We don't have enough space for our current staff, vehicles, and administration. And so as we look at how our services are growing, we need to also prepare for a larger facility. So I believe total project cost is roughly 30 million on that new facilities, identifying potentially a satellite location. And then we have a separate grant for 150,000 that would guide us through some of the needs assessment and initial designs and planning that would provide, for example, a cost benefit analysis to submit with that grant. So that is the only update I have there.
Any questions for Davis? We'll hold it down and wait and see what happens. Next.
Talking to your legislators never hurts. Again, thank you to Commissioner Morris for what she was able to secure for BCGO.
Yeah, so we can all play a role in that, and even constituents outside of this room can help support that, which would support future rates and things of that nature. So if I understand
You
that
have
correctly.
some new elected officials at the state level that were involved in some of these initial TAC discussions. Might be worth reaching out to some of the newer elected officials just to bring them up to speed on what's happening and see how they can get involved.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, I was thinking of the same thing in terms of our new elected official in the Albion area. Would you or someone be willing to, if I set up a meeting, be willing to answer the larger questions of Calhoun County versus just the Albion area not having anything?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will try to contact Steve Frisbee.
Okay. And separately, we have a legislative thing coming up with MPTA. I would be happy to engage anybody who would want to attend that and come with us.
Okay, but yeah, let me know when and I can come. Great, thank you.
Secretary Davis will represent the board at that meeting. If you would let us know when that is, let all of us know, and others are encouraged to attend. But at this
Is it
point,
in the near future, you think?
I think it's in March. I'll get the date for sure. I think it's in March in Lansing. So we go to them so they don't have to come to us.
That's fine.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right.
This is Clark. If I might interject, Eric,
Yes, please.
that that is the timeframe MPTA was looking at prior to my retirement back in September. So I think that is correct. They're looking at a early March timeframe for that meeting.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Clark. TAC appointment to BCATS. Yeah, yeah. I'll invite Ms. Avis back to the podium.
So, if you are not familiar with the term MPO, it's Metropolitan Planning Organization. All of our urbanized areas, everywhere in the country have an MPO. Ours is called BCATS, which stands for the Battle Creek Area Transportation Study. They are responsible for planning, programming, and basically administering transportation dollars. So that's roads, non-motorized transit. There's two committees or groups that meet under BCATS. One is the technical committee, the other is the policy committee. Those groups are responsible for allocating those dollars, approving the jobs as they get programmed for future dollars. So it's called a TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, and it goes out 4 years. So we just finished 2026 through 2029. And that document is public facing, public participation, but basically outlines all of the road projects from MDOT's perspective, as well as local roads and transit. So transit is required by FTA, FHWA, and MDOT to be a participant at BCATS or at your local MPO. I know BCATS has sent a letter inviting the TAC board to become an official member. Technical and Policy Committee have amended the bylaws to include the TAC as a participating member. Now, I suppose good and bad. Unfortunately, this comes with a financial obligation that is split amongst the local providers. So the county, the city, the transit system, they would share the costs of BCATS, but similar to us, BCATS is funded primarily through grants. So the local share isn't anything outstanding and massive, and that'll be shared with the TAC board if it hasn't already. That would likely start October 1 of 2025 when the TAC becomes that designated recipient status. The participation on BCATS gives the TAC a voice in how transportation dollars are spent in the metropolitan area. So that metropolitan area extends outside of just the city limits of Battle Creek. It goes into Emmett, Bedford, Penfield, almost all the way up to like the Kalamazoo County line. So there's many participants at the table, and transit should obviously be one of those participants with a voting voice. So Jeff Franklin, he's the executive director of BCATS. Currently, he's a one-man show. The planner retired at the end of December, and so I believe Jeff will be looking for a business assistant soon. But you will be invited. You are welcome to attend those meetings. You will need to appoint somebody to represent the TAC. I currently represent the city of Battle Creek on both technical and policy committee. Those meetings are the first and third Wednesdays, I believe, of every month at 1:30. You can represent anybody. So you could, or you can appoint anybody. You could appoint me. You could appoint a consultant. You could appoint one of your board members. I don't believe there's any urgency in appointing somebody. If you wanted to wait, if you wanted to attend, and if you would like, we could invite Jeff Franklin to attend one of these meetings and answer any questions you have about the MPO.
How are we feeling about that piece?
I think if Mallory, if you can do that, then of course you are knowledgeable about what it is all about. So I would recommend that we appoint Mallory.
Okay.
Do we have the right to appoint Mallory when she's a Battle Creek staff member or how would you?
On it.
I was gonna suggest that based on our next one of our next meetings. Ted and I can have that conversation. And,
Yeah, we were slightly involved with Pat Carr when she ran it. The BCAT, just mildly as the city of Marshall, but yeah, if we, I.
If we
ideally,
can.
I
I don't want to create any confusion between now and October.
Right.
With you representing two entities, if there's, you know, a difference of opinion, what hat do you wear? And never mind. So having said that, we'll go ahead and consider that, for the future. When is the next meeting coming up? I know it's on my schedule, but I'll put out, you know, whoever's available, maybe we can,
On for BCATs?
yeah.
It might be tomorrow.
Nah, it's not, not for me, it's not.
That would be the third.
That's the third one.
So it is on the 22nd at 1:30.
Yeah, next week.
Yep. And that's policy committee.
Okay. All right. So we'll tackle that next month and, that'll allow us time to ask Ted and what have you and send, a minimum, a half qualified person to attend and maximum fully qualified person to attend and address these subject matters. Okay.
And it's very important that we have representation when we're fully after October 1st, because I can guarantee you from a former city engineer's viewpoint is we're looking at roads, we're looking at bridges and where the money goes. And transit is a second thought. So it's very, very important that you have a seat at that table and be very involved, whoever that is. So just.
I will say I've been involved with many MPOs from my time prior at MDOT, and BCATS is probably one of the most collaborative and cooperative MPOs I've ever seen. And I don't know if it's just because it's so small, but they share transit dollars pretty well. In fact, for our 26 through 29 tip planning, transit got 22% of the money. So we came out pretty well and everybody was pretty cooperative about it.
Awesome.
Thank you for that feedback.
It's important.
We'll go ahead and move on to public comments. Any other public comments or non-agenda items? Okay. Good. Having said that, board and executive director comments, any, I'm not sure what board member contacts means. What does that mean? Oh, if there's been any contact, I don't know. I see, Commissioner Morris raising her hand and then Secretary, Davis, I'll come to you next.
If you wanted to talk about context first, I'm not talking about context.
Yeah, I understand the words. I'm not understanding the context.
Okay.
So,
Previously, we've had this on because we were making contacts in the community. We were doing presentations. We were talking to people.
Yeah.
If that is, I mean, we could just use board comments, you know, rather than contacts now.
Yeah.
Because we're not really out there pushing or marketing right now.
yes.
So we can take that one off if you
Okay.
like. But I didn't arbitrarily do that.
No, I wasn't. I'm just saying, yes.
You know.
Thank you for clarifying that. Before I move to Commissioner Morris, is collaborations with community organizations. I see, senior adults, mental health, folks, food security / insecurity, and then available grant initiatives. Anybody want to speak to that agenda item? Those are all active things. So as and I would add other transportation services that are outside of, what currently operates and what have you. They're very much interested to see, how this shapes up in the participation and what have you. So
Yeah, the collaborations on, for me, of course, is awaiting the big event of having transportation in the
Yes.
community. So everywhere I go, usually, and meetings, especially with seniors and mental health and food security and things like that, it comes up in terms of when are we going to get transportation? So.
And I know we got, no, I appreciate that. And we do have some answers for that. So, and I know we had and we may touch on that a little bit with this public comment that I want to address Commissioner Morris as somebody, as a resident, if you will, pose some questions for this body under a public comment context, and I'd like to address that at this time. If you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Morris, I'll turn it over to you and ask any technical assistance that Ms. Avis can provide if she would step up as well.
Thank you. So I received an email yesterday from a resident in Battle Creek that had several questions. So we can go through the questions one by one to just get them answered. So the first question is the expected date. The BC Transit will no longer be funded by the city of Battle Creek, and TACC becomes responsible for operations and funding. The period of time BC taxpayers will be paying for two transit entities, BC Transit and TACC.
Okay. So as I said, the goal date for that designated recipient status is October 1 of 2025. The importance of that designated recipient status is that is what makes the TAC eligible to receive the state and federal funding that is required to be able to operate the transit system. So hopefully before October 1, that designated recipient status comes in. And then beginning October 1, the TAC would begin receiving those funds. Now, as we've talked about in prior meetings, it's unlikely that all of the letters of intent, agreements, transfer of assets, transfer of people and labor contracts would happen by October 1 of this year. It seems like more time than it is. So realistically, likely the city of Battle Creek or a third party, the city of Marshall, somebody else will continue providing those services on behalf of the TAC while the TAC continues to work through those agreements that transfer human assets. And it gives the TAC the time to get the operational framework after the government required framework is satisfied. So October 1 of 2025, financially, I would say July to October of 2026 functionally.
And a lot of that technical work is happening with the planning committee that we talked about earlier.
Correct.
That's tackling that to make this entity more operational with it under the right pretense. So a lot of moving parts. Your next question, Tom?
I guess just a question, Janesha, since you received that, how are all these answers, because there are more questions, because you mentioned to me earlier, how is email sender are you going to respond or Mallory going to respond? I just want to make sure that we respond to any of our people in our communities.
So I plan to follow up with the questions that are being answered right now, as well as this person asked for these questions to be answered at the TAC meeting. So I assume that they may be watching it.
Okay, good.
For the general public, there's several mechanisms that could be utilized, and I'll just repeat those. This is one creative way, is one-on-one outreach, and we try and address those as best we can. The other piece is through the website. We get questions and we try and answer those as promptly as possible. And then another piece would be our frequently asked questions piece on the website, in which these may be posted in a general way for the public to consume, because they were very good questions. So, and then there may be more, oh, I'm sorry. And then the obvious one is public comments here in person. So there's two opportunities for that. So there's several mechanisms that could be utilized. I encourage the public to utilize those based on their choice, and we'll do our best to answer as promptly as possible. Next question.
Well, your second question, there was two questions there, because you had read that earlier to me, was a question.
Well, let's let her ask the question first.
Okay, well, I thought she asked that question, but go ahead. The one about funding from the city of Battle Creek, so.
About the period of time taxpayers will be paying for it. I think Mallory kind of answered that when she was saying that. The next question kind of goes with it. The expected date that all services promised by TACC will become available for use.
So I would say again that that is largely dependent on the designated recipient status and when that gets approved. However, a huge however, there's nothing that precludes the TACC from entering into agreements to provide service before that, which are one of the topics that planning committee is talking about. Obviously, everybody recognizes that a millage has already been levied and people are anxious to get that service. And so there's nothing that says the TACC can't use some of those dollars in the meantime to contract with another provider to provide some level of service. Now, is it going to be 45 vehicles? Maybe not, but at least ramping up that service leading up to the full transition over. That is completely possible.
Or you, correct me if I'm wrong, or utilize some of those dollars to put assets on order for that future usage, because those orders take time.
Correct.
So I think some of that, Commissioner, would be in play. The general public wouldn't see that happening in the background, but we're trying to shore that up based on the designated recipient's time frame and so on and so forth. And that dance has many factors to it. I'll just keep reiterating that. So, but you have a group of folks that are trying to manage through that and communicate with the other participating municipalities in terms of timing and so on and so forth.
The next question is, can you speak to why the TACC board chose to levy the max millage this year rather than a lesser amount?
Yes, this is probably the most frequently asked question that even I get. And the answer is because of that designated recipient status. So everybody will know the word designated recipient by the time we're done. So everything we do is based on reimbursement. So if you are from the grant world, private nonprofit grant world, you typically apply for a grant and you get a check for that grant. Federal grants do not work that way. These federal grants are all on a reimbursement basis. And so you have to incur the expense and then draw down on that expense afterward. Right now, the city of Battle Creek essentially floats the transit system until those federal dollars are available to be reimbursed. Same thing with the city of Marshall. Those dollars are based on expenses. They're not a dedicated revenue. So in order for the TACC to be able to be operational by October 1, they needed to have money in the bank to match against that and to be able to operate the service and then use those federal funds that would come October 1 of 2025 to reimburse that cost. So the TACC needs money in the bank to be able to operate long enough until those federal dollars come in to reimburse. Also, to Eric's previous point, the TACC needs money right now to be able to purchase capital, to be able to hire staff, to be able to purchase insurance and liability insurance. The funds that were allocated for the TACC previously from each of the 4 cities and the county were restricted funds. So those funds were restricted to specific things such as marketing and consultant services. The TACC couldn't use those funds to buy vehicles or to hire staff or to operate any services, and largely $250,000 isn't enough to do any of those things. So that is why the TACC needed to do it this year. If they had levied a lesser amount, or if they had not levied it at all when they did, then they wouldn't have had those dollars available, and it would have made that designated recipient status much harder to achieve before October 1.
Which would have impacted which would have impacted things like assets and things of that nature that the community needs that aren't operating right now potentially.
Yes, no matter what, that tax levy had to come before, whether it was this year or next year, that tax levy had to come before service could be provided.
Okay.
Then the next two are, can you provide the beginning and ending date of the TAC fiscal year? And then is there a TAC organizational chart?
So the TAC established in October 1 to September 30 fiscal year, which lines up with federal and state grants, not city years. Which, so we are in fiscal year 25 right now for the TAC. And as far as the organizational chart, I would say that would likely come at a later date from the consultant at the direction of the TAC. But keeping in mind, yes, the TAC is building a brand new system, but a lot of the organizational structure exists between the agencies that exist already. And so the TAC really just kind of has to adopt a larger scale version of that using most likely their consultant.
Lastly, there are 3 questions about different groups, but the question is the same. For the TAC Planning Committee, LAC, and Friends of Transportation, they wanted to know the function, members, compensated, non-compensated, and if they are compensated, the entity responsible for paying compensated members.
All of the TAC board and subcommittees and committees are non-compensated. Volunteer board, thank you for your time. The meeting dates, when they're scheduled, will be added to the events section of the Ride Calhoun website. And as required, public notices are posted. Typically, LAC, for example, will adopt, once they get on a regular cadence, they'll adopt a year worth of meetings, a year calendar for meetings, and then just amend that as necessary, similar to what the TAC board did. The purpose of the TAC Planning Committee that we talked about earlier is to work through the assets, liabilities, and administration, those pillars, I guess, that dictate how smoothly and quickly that transition from city services to TAC services can happen. What was the other one? The TAC, or the LAC. The purpose of the LAC is, that stands for Local Advisory Committee. LAC, it is required by law for us to have an LAC. The city of Battle Creek has one, city of Marshall has one, and then the TAC has one that has members from both the city of Battle Creek and the city of Marshall's. That LAC is required to primarily provide comments about accessibility as it pertains to seniors and people with disabilities, but they can serve a broader function of advisory role, such as advising on needs and feedback and community services. So they play an advisory role. They don't make policy. They can provide recommendations to the board, but they don't have direct authority to make changes. They are required to meet at least once a year under state law and approve the annual application for funding. So at a minimum, they have to meet at least once a year. The state law also outlines composition of that board. And so that board has to contain people who represent users of public transportation, seniors, and people with disabilities at a minimum. And then the Friends of Transit group is supporters of public transportation and the tax initiative. It's an informal group. It isn't appointed by the TAC. It is a group of citizens, neighbors, some who are involved in transportation or who have been involved in other committees in the past, such as Mr. Asher, who provide outreach and things that the board can't do. So I use the difference between advocate and educate. The Friends of Transit group can advocate. The board and other elected bodies cannot advocate, they can educate. So the Friends of Transit group is a social group. They do have the ability to fundraise if they wished for future initiatives, but they are not compensated. You're welcome.
A question. When I did outreach for LAC member from my community, one of the questions was, is along with compensation, but because we would have to drive to Battle Creek or wherever, is there funding to help with gas or maybe a gas card or something like that, that the individuals could use, to help decrease their in-pocket, out-of-pocket costs?
We're not able to compensate them. So from our experience with our LAC, however, we do provide transportation to those meetings. And I believe Christy has worked with each of the individuals to ensure that it's at a time and location that's accessible to them, and or accessible by transit. So somebody coming from Albion, for example, we could arrange a BC Go to get them to or from the meeting, and we could do that at no cost for their participation in that meeting.
Okay.
But otherwise, we would not be able to compensate anybody for their, yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Lots of moving parts. Yes, ma'am.
I do have another comment, not about this, but about the board. So when I got this, I kind of was looking on the agenda, Mallory and I were looking for a place for communications, petitions, reports, and there isn't that on our agenda as of now. So that might be something we would want to look at adding for when we do get future communications. So there's a specific agenda portion for that.
And I think that, yes, let's review that. Let's review that, because another section I wanted to add were progress updates. So for instance, we know that we've immediately, the week the millage passed, we put some vehicles on order and things of that nature. Thank you, City of Battle Creek and others that helped participate in that. And that would be, once they arrived, would be part of the Ride Calhoun assets and what have you. That's part of the subcommittee. This committee has gone to have an understanding from the City of Battle Creek that new assets coming in would be skinned in that manner, knowing that we're skating to where we're going with providing those services and what have you. Not just for the City of Battle Creek, but for Albion and other expanded service opportunities. So we're thinking of those things as we're making moves right now. And I think that would be important for that to be a matter of agenda, because so many things are happening so fast. The boring technical stuff is happening in the background, but the real magic is when we start talking about different types of vehicles hitting the road, when and what have you. That's when our neighbors will see some movement. So
I can
we'll
give
add
you-
that to the agenda as well.
I can give you an update on that real quick if you would like.
Yes, I was going to ask for that after we got done with this segment. Answer your question? Okay. Tom, any? Okay, all right. Doc? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, I know, you always speak up. But yeah, if you can give us update on our progress so far that we haven't heard. I know I kind of jumped the gun on some of that stuff, but it's exciting nonetheless.
It is. So I think what the public doesn't get to see is all the stuff that's happening in the background at both the City of Marshall and the City of Battle Creek. So obviously there's partnership and collaboration between the cities and the TACC, recognizing that the goal is to transition everything to the TACC. We are awarding this week a contract for 4 vehicles. Those will be cutaway buses that are the smaller paratransit style vehicle. It's like a small bus that's low to the ground. So we are awarding that contract this week to order 4. Again, fully anticipating that we're going to order those branded as Ride Calhoun. This would save dollars, federal dollars, taxpayer dollars in having to rebrand things later. And so let's say those vehicles get delivered in April, we fully intend to put them on the road, branded as Ride Calhoun, and provide that service. In the meantime, we have a contract for 4 additional vehicles that are under the BC Go grant. That was from Commissioner Morris's discussions with elected officials. And we intend to order those vehicles within the next 30 days or so. Again, those vehicles being branded as Ride Calhoun. Those vehicles would be the RC Flex vehicles, and so they would be branded as such. We have 3 fixed route buses that we're ordering, again, branded as RC Max. So keeping, the public up to speed on what's happening behind the scenes, we have roughly 14 vehicles under contract that we anticipate being delivered this year that would be delivered as Ride Calhoun, branded. The city would own them until that transition over to the TAC. So as I said, there's nothing that precludes the TAC from providing services, and those services will very much be on the road before October 1.
You know what I'm going to ask?
Yes.
Albion. Will Albion and Springfield see any of those buses in the area?
Yes, so we are working with that planning committee to directly zone some vehicles for Albion. What we're working through right now is where those vehicles are housed, basically. So are those vehicles that are going to be housed in Marshall, or are we going to house them out in Battle Creek? But to provide some expanded dedicated service to the city of Albion.
Okay.
Separately, for the city of Springfield, the city of Springfield was awarded a shared streets and spaces grant to provide some pedestrian improvements. We were also awarded some shared streets and spaces funding for bus stop improvements. And we are working directly with Chaz at Springfield Department of Public Works to coordinate those services so that as the city of Springfield improves their pedestrian infrastructure, particularly through, I think it's Upton, Avenue A, around the park there and by the Calhoun County High School, we're able to expand bus stops in those areas. Right now, the limiting factor is that there is no ADA access there because there's a lack of pedestrian infrastructure. And so it would be incredibly costly for us to put bus stops in because we would have to add sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that. The shared streets and spaces grant that Springfield got allows us to kind of coordinate those improvements and potentially look at that route realignment for the VA Fort Custer route sooner rather than later and add bus stops along the way of those pedestrian upgrades that are ongoing in Springfield. So likely by the spring, obviously we're not in construction season right now. So likely by the spring, we'll at least have some plans approved by the city of Springfield.
Perfect. Any other questions, comments for Mallory? Ms. Ames? Thank you very much for that update.
You're welcome.
Exciting stuff. And thank you, Commissioner Morris, for bringing those to this body to address. And like I said, there'll be a variety of mechanisms that will communicate that back and including yours directly. And if there's any more questions, just let us know. All right. Having said that, that concludes our agenda items for today. Our next meeting is January 28th, barring any impromptu scheduled meetings to take care of specific items. But that'll be met with public notice and what have you, if we do it in that manner outside of a workshop or what have you. So we'll handle that as it comes and kind of go from there. Tom.
One final question. Who is going to be the keeper of our forms? Is that going to be the secretary? Is that going to be technical staff? Where are these going when we turn them in today?
Can I recommend they be scanned and placed into the shared drive?
Yes.
There it is.
Okay.
Scanned and shared, but then the hard copies, that still is a very good question. Just in terms of what we have, we got to crack that nut because we have a lot of things going different ways. We're still going back through. Linda kept a lot of those things, so we're still trying to go through what we have, what we don't have, what we need to update, and so on and so forth. So we don't have a designated spot yet. That's why I'm dancing around that. We'll tackle that. But I would send all of those. You know what? Can we send those to you, Christy? Okay. I would sign those and get those to Christy. Bring them here with you on the 28th. And then we'll have that designated spot for those to go. All right. If you don't give them to her today.
Make it into a plane.
Any other questions, comments? Or what have you? Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for your participation in robust conversation, discussion.
Drive safely going home. If you haven't turned